Okay, so ever feel like you're navigating a minefield? Not a real one, obviously, but the kind that erupts in your living room when you ask your kid to, like, put on their
Pervading
shoes.
their room.
Oh, yeah, the classic room cleaning battle. We've all been there, right?
Yeah.
Parents, caregivers. Even if you just know a kid, chances are you've encountered defiance.
It's practically a universal language for kids, isn't it?
Totally. And today we're going deep on this. We're talking strategies, not just to survive it, but to actually, like, come out the other side saner.
And maybe even, dare I say, enjoy the journey a bit more.
Okay, now you're talking. So someone sent us this really interesting guide on defiant behavior in kids, and honestly, it's packed with useful stuff.
It is. And what I appreciate about it is that it doesn't frame defiance as this enemy to be vanquished. It emphasizes understanding where it's coming from, because often it's just a child's way of trying to communicate, test boundaries, figure out their own independence.
Okay, so it's like less about crushing the rebellion and more about like meeting them where they're at.
Exactly. And then from that place of understanding, you can respond in ways that are actually effective. So it's not about shutting down a child's spirit, it's about channeling it constructively.
That makes a lot of sense. And one of the first things this guide really emphasized is the importance of clear expectations and
Consistency. That's the big one.
right, consistency. Because, like, imagine a basketball game with no rules.
Chaos. Utter chaos.
Exactly. Kids need that structure, those boundaries, not because we're trying to, like, control them, but because it
Yeah.
actually helps them feel safe and secure.
Absolutely. There's even research on this. The University of California did a study that showed kids with consistent boundaries actually had lower cortisol levels, which
Mm.
means less stress.
Wow, so it's like science backs up the whole rules make kids feel better thing. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But then it's not just about, like, laying down the law all the time, right? We also want to encourage the behavior we do want to see.
Which brings us to the power of positive reinforcement.
Yes, and I'm not talking about that generic good job that we throw around like confetti.
Right, because praising everything actually loses its impact over time.
Mm.
We have to be specific and genuine.
So instead of good job cleaning your room, it's more like,
Wow, you organized all your books by color. That's amazing.
I love that. It's so much more meaningful. I actually tried this on my own kids, and it was like their brains like lit up. They were so proud of
That's
themselves.
what we want, that sense of accomplishment.
It's huge. But I think one thing that a lot of parents struggle with, myself included, is that it can feel like we're stuck in this loop of do this, don't do that.
Right, and that's where the idea of giving choices comes in.
Choices.
Yes, kids, just like adults, need a sense of autonomy. The guide talks about offering limited, age-appropriate choices as a way to actually reduce defiance. So instead of saying, put your shoes on, you can say, do you want to wear the blue shoes or the red ones today?
Okay, so it's about giving them a sense of control within a structured environment.
Precisely. It's a win-win.
I like it. It's like, you still have to put shoes on, but you get to choose which ones.
Exactly.
Now, I think we also have to acknowledge that sometimes defiance isn't about choices or boundaries, but it's a sign of something deeper going on.
Absolutely. And that's where it's so important for us, as the adults in the room, to take a breath, pause, and try to understand the why behind the behavior.
Right, because maybe they're not actually trying to defy us. Maybe they're hungry or tired or feeling overwhelmed.
Exactly. Or maybe there's something going on that they're struggling to communicate, and acting out is their way of trying to get our attention. So approaching the situation with curiosity, instead of just jumping into punishment mode, can make a world of difference.
It's like that saying, behavior is communication. It's so true. Speaking of things to avoid, the guide also talks about some common pitfalls. And one that really stood out to me was the power struggle.
Oh, the power struggle. It's like a trap, isn't it?
It totally is. And we've all been there, right? That
Yeah.
because I said so moment.
Which almost never ends well. The guide actually suggests some really helpful de-escalation tactics. Like sometimes just giving the child space, even for a few minutes, can make a huge difference.
Yeah, sometimes everyone just needs a moment to cool down.
Exactly. Or using humor. Sometimes if you can find a way to lighten the mood, it can totally shift the energy.
Oh, I love that. Okay, but what about those tempting shortcuts? Like threats and bribes.
Ah, yes. The if you don't do this, then, or the if you do this, then you'll get.
Yeah.
It's so tempting to go there because it feels like a quick fix.
Right, but
But research actually shows that relying on these tactics can actually backfire in the long run. Yeah, it can actually hinder a child's moral development. because we don't want to teach kids to do the right thing just to get a reward or avoid punishment. We want them to do it because they understand it's the right thing to do.
That's a really good point. It's like we want them to internalize those good values, not just be motivated by external rewards.
Exactly.
Okay, this is also helpful. And finally, before we wrap up, I want to touch on something else that the guide mentions, the importance of avoiding labels.
Yes, this is so crucial. Because when we label a child, even if we don't mean to, it can really stick with them.
Like you're being bad or you're always so difficult.
Right. And it's essential to remember that the behavior is the problem, not the child themselves.
Okay, so how do we do that? How do
Yeah.
we separate the behavior from the child?
By focusing on addressing the specific actions, not labeling their character. So instead of saying, "You're so messy," you could say, "I see your clothes are on the floor. Can you please put them in the hamper?"
It's so simple, but it makes such a difference, doesn't it? Focusing on the action, not the person. Amazing. This has been so insightful. We've covered so much ground here. But I also know that sometimes, even with the best strategies, parenting can still feel really overwhelming, and that's okay.
It absolutely is. And this is where knowing when to seek professional help comes in. Because sometimes we need a little extra support.
Totally. And there's no shame in that.
None at all. Asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness. It's about getting the support you and your child deserve. So if the defiance is severe, if it's impacting daily life, or if you suspect there might be any underlying issues, don't hesitate to reach out to a professional.
Couldn't agree more. This has been an incredible deep dive, and we've learned so much. As we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought. We've been talking about these strategies in the context of parenting, but honestly, how many of these could we all benefit from applying in our own lives?
Right.
Clear communication, empathy, choosing our battles, those are valuable tools for anyone at any age.
Couldn't agree more.
So as you navigate the ups and downs of, well, life in general, maybe keep these strategies in mind. Might be surprised at the difference they can make.